Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
Hello. How is everyone?
We hope and pray that each and every one of you all had a blessed weekend. I don't know about you all, but down here in Florida, we're starting to feel the effects of fall. It was a little cool this weekend. So welcome fall. Welcome new season.
Yeah.
So welcome insightfulers, as Shnequia has done.
Well, I got a new name for them now.
Okay, what's the new term?
Because you kind of gave me the side eye before, Keisha, when I was saying insightfulers. So now I'm saying insightful gang.
Okay.
Insightful gang.
Okay.
Like that. Like that was a little bit better.
I like that.
Yeah, the insightful game. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned fall because it's definitely been like that here in Atlanta. Like you can really feel the cool weather, and I love it because I'm a fall person anyway. So I'm good with that.
Me and you are fall babies, so
yes, we are.
Yes,
part. Yeah, so that's what's up.
Yes. So like I said, thank you all again for joining us on this evening. We're going to go right ahead and jump into this evening's episode. But as always, we want to recap what it was that we talked about or discussed during our last session. And so for those of you all who joined us, or if you were not able to join us and you either listen to us via the various platforms that we're now on as far as podcasts are concerned, or you were able to watch the video on our Facebook page. We had a very good friend as well as colleague, Matthias Sweets, who came and discussed STDs with regards to syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia.
Shout out to Matthias, by the way.
Thank you. He also discussed some other STDs in their variety, more so about, preventative methods should you happen, or even if you don't necessarily contract an STD, or you know of somebody who has an STD and they are displaying signs and symptoms, the different types of mechanisms that are out there to help these individuals and things of that nature. Also, we spoke about the various ethnic groups and populations that we're now seeing surges as far as syphilis and gonorrhea and chlamydia are concerned and things of that nature. So like I said, if you have yet to check out that content, like I said, feel free to either take a look at it on our YouTube page, on our Facebook page. Shnequia told you all the last time we're now on Instagram, so definitely go over on Instagram if you have yet to follow us.
Yeah,
and follow us. And like I said, we're also on various platforms as far as podcasts are concerned, for those of you all who rather listen versus tuning in to watch an actual live feed.
Yeah, so basically all the major audio podcast platforms. We've just been put on Apple Podcasts, which I'm really happy about that because that's the one I have been waiting on for ever. But so we're finally on there. So whatever y'all like to listen to for your audio podcast, we're on there now, all major ones. So we're happy about that. And thank y'all again for all the support that y'all have been giving us. And as always, continue to like, subscribe, share, follow to all of our various social media pages.
Yes.
All right.
We're going to kick it off for this evening. So as you all seen in the title, why does it hurt so bad? And so a lot of people may have been thinking like, what in the world are they going to be talking about or discussing on tonight as far as that title is concerned? But as me and Shnequia was meeting a couple of weeks ago and brainstorming, this was actually a topic that she brought to the forefront with regards to what we wanted to talk about and some information that we wanted to share with our audience member and things of that nature. So I'm going to kick it off to Shnequia, and if you want to tell them how this came about and things of that nature, and then from there we'll.
Sure. So, like Keisha said, I think it might have been 2 weeks ago when we were talking about just planning this episode. And I was just thinking about times in my life where I felt rejected. And whether that was in relationships or in jobs or even in friendships. And for some reason, like I felt like God was speaking to me about talk about rejection. Like for days, like that particular word stayed on my mind. And I know Keisha and I was trying to figure out what type of topic we wanted to discuss. And so I came to her and I was just like, well, Keisha, why don't we talk about rejection? Because that's something that pretty much everybody can relate to. Whether or not people say that they've never been rejected, I highly doubt that that's not true. Because at some point or another, you've been rejected. And I just thought that would be just a great topic to discuss. And Keisha agreed with me. And so that's kind of a little bit about how this episode topic came about. So like Keisha was saying, with the title, Why Does It Hurt So Bad? We want to title it that to kind of set the tone in terms of like what rejection kind of means, because it does feel bad. Like nobody likes to feel rejected about anything. And so before we can talk about like rejection and different types of rejection, you got to know exactly what it means.
Exactly.
And so I was looking at different definitions of the word rejection. And one that kind of stuck out to me, but it's a very simple definition. It was on goodtherapy.org. And basically what they define rejection is the act of pushing someone or something away. So very simple, right? But even though that's a simple definition, it carries a lot of volume, because when we do reject something or someone, we are pushing people away, or we are pushing something away. And when you think about rejection, there's different types of rejection. A lot of people think of just relationships. That's one form of rejection, but there's many others. You got family rejection. You have rejection from friendships. You have rejection from jobs. And then you also have rejection from, I know you had talked about this before, Keisha, social media.
Social media. Also, I was even thinking, like, even working in the medical field, you know, there are times where people are in need of transplants, you know, whether they need a kidney or they need a new heart. And so they go through with these surgeries, and then for whatever reason, their body rejects that new organ in their system. So you can see rejection in all different forms in your life. And like you said, if you have yet to experience rejection, as the old folks, you know, just would say, wait a little while, because it's going to happen. It's part of being a human. It's part of our human nature. But even though we know that it's going to come, there are ways that we're going to talk about, you know, further in this discussion of how to best deal with it from a positive standpoint of view, but also if you don't deal with it, what are some negative effects as well, and how that could cause some hindrances in your life.
Yeah. And so at any time, Insightful Gang, if you feel like you want to jump in the comments and talk about, you know, times when you all felt rejected or some examples, feel free to do so. We're going to leave the comment section open at any time. So feel free to jump in if y'all have anything y'all want to share. And from a mental health standpoint, because y'all know that I work in mental health, rejection, when you experience it, it can refer to a lot of different feelings. You know, you can experience shame, you can experience some sadness, and you can even experience some grief. And, you know, people may experience rejection differently than others. Because one of the things, Keisha, we talked about when we brainstormed this episode was about why it seems like rejection affects others more heavily than it does some other people.
Right.
And what do you kind of think about that? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
So, like, after we met and I started doing some research on it, one of the things that came up that I kind of had like a light bulb moment, like that does make a lot of sense. A lot of researchers were talking about a lot of times how we respond to rejection. It has a lot to do with our childhood and what we experienced as a child. whether that be small, medium, or large. And so if you've experienced some type of trauma in your childhood or during your adolescent years, and once again, you have not figured out how to best cope with it, there is evidence that proves that there is a great chance that as an adult, when you experience very similar situations, that you're going to react in a very similar, if not harsher manner because of that. Versus somebody, like I said, who may not have experienced that type of trauma or that type of ordeal. So that's one reason why I think people react the way in which they act, like I said, based on childhood trauma.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I also think it has a lot to do with just our belief systems. Mm-hmm. And if you refer back to, I believe it was episode 2, which, by the way, was our highest viewed episode. We talked about belief systems and how that can have an impact like on our self-esteem and on our mental health. And you have to think about, in terms of what you were saying about the childhood trauma, Keisha, a lot of times the belief systems come from that. Yeah. What we learn from childhood, learned behaviors and things like that. So I think it definitely has a lot to do with our belief systems and about acceptance, like wanting acceptance from people. And and when I say people, it can be like people in our inner circle, our friends, family, or even in society or on the job or whatever. So, and I think, people say that, they don't want to feel accepted, but it's important to people. And, how you deal with, I guess, that term of wanting to be acceptance can affect in terms of how you're impacted by rejection. And I was doing some additional research that I found very interesting. It was talking about during the early stage of evolution, it was saying that early humans who are at risk of being ostracized from like their tribe that they were a part of or that they belonged to, that they were most likely to experience rejection about that. Mm-hmm. So they believe that has a lot to do with how rejection developed. And so people that experience like a painful rejection from the tribe was likely to encourage individuals to modify any problematic behavior. So in order to avoid rejection. So those who were able to avoid rejection was most likely able to survive in that tribe. And so if you think about that theory or whatever, I do feel that is a kind of a point, because it's kind of like the strongest survive. You've heard that term or that little saying or whatever. And a lot of times that does occur. Whoever is considered the strongest, it's kind of like they're immune to rejection or whatever have you. So that kind of stuck out a lot to me.
Yeah. And another thing, like I found out, me and you was discussing from another mental health standpoint of view, is personality disorders. This is really, really, really shocking to me. So someone who has a personality disorder usually experience, feelings of rejection and or abandonment and things of that nature, probably more constantly than someone who has not, who hasn't been diagnosed with a personality disorder. So that was another thing that I found, like, that was kind of like, wow, like this is not amazing information, but what's the word that I want to put on it? I don't know. It just kind of like
interesting.
Yes, that's the word. It kind of it captured my attention, because that's something that I didn't necessarily think about, but just like you working with mental health patients who have been diagnosed with those disorders, and even though they're in our facility for a short period of time, even in interacting with them or dialoguing with them, you can see as to why rejection may be constant and much more prevalent in their lives, and why they take issues such as abandonment, why they take it so hard, why it can be so detrimental to them as an individual and or a person.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up the personality disorder thing, because there's two personality disorders like that I think about that really fit the term of how rejection can play a part. Yeah, and y'all probably have heard of these terms before, but definitely borderline personality disorder,
Yeah.
because that's one of the most common personality disorders that people know about. And a lot of that has to do with fear of being alone and fear of abandonment and just unstable moods and not being able to regulate their emotions and things like that. And so one of the things that typically occurs with borderline personality individuals is the fact that they don't like to be rejected. And a lot of that has to do with the symptoms that they experience to that. So that's one personality disorder that comes to mind for me. And then another one is avoidant personality disorder, because one of the main things with that is they avoid being around individuals altogether. And if you think about it, when we experience rejection or we fear rejection, we typically don't want to be around people because we want to save face. You know, it's kind of like, if I don't be around you because I've experienced rejection before, I'm protecting myself and my space by just kind of stepping away and just kind of doing my own thing.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And then another thing I remember that we ran across too, outside of personality disorders and core beliefs and childhood trauma, is those of us who are very sensitive. And I can relate to this, especially for those who know me. I've been this way since I was a child. So for those of us who identify we are shy, or we like to call ourselves introverted, when things happen, whether those things take place where we're involved in the situation or it happens to a loved one, and because you have such a caring and a nurturing heart, once again, it could leave you more susceptible to rejection. And so when you are faced with rejection, dependent, and it really doesn't matter, like I said, if it's professionally, it's coming from your family, it's coming from a medical standpoint of view, it's coming from a relational stance. It can leave someone very much overwhelmed. And also, you could also find yourself in some very dangerous situations because of it, because you feel so much, you have such a nurturing spirit and things like that.
I see we have some comments in the chat. One in particular from Gwen that stands out. People try to adapt or change so they can fit in, so they're not rejected. In many areas of society, there's the group team mentality of wanting to fit in. When we stand out, we adjust so we aren't different. And that's very true. I think that points back to what you were saying.
Yes.
About rejection.
Yeah, that need to belong that you were talking about. Attachment. That's what it goes back to.
And then I was also reading in research that people with ADHD can experience fear of rejection. And they were saying that there's a term for that, and it's called rejection sensitive dysphoria. And they were saying common symptoms of that is related to self-criticism, extreme sadness after rejection, and even social anxiety.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was interesting to me to learn about that. But I guess that does make sense, because when you think about ADHD, because it's like difficulty focusing, difficulty concentrating, a lot of times they don't necessarily want people to know that. So I guess there would be a fear of rejection regarding that, because it's like, dang, you can't focus, like you can't concentrate, you know how sometimes people can be with their words. So I can understand that being one. Can definitely understand that.
Oh yes. And so now we want to talk to you all about the negative effects of rejection. So if you don't learn how to deal with rejection in a healthy manner, which we're going to get to next, it can definitely, like I said, lead to some dire consequences on your end. So, Shnequia, you want to dive right in and talk about what are some, and from your standpoint of view, or just some things that you've gone through in your life? Like, what's a negative effect of dealing with being pushed away or being abandoned?
Of course. So definitely symptoms of depression sticks out to me, and symptoms of anxiety, because I know, like, there's been times in my life where I felt rejected. Primarily, a lot of my rejection has come from relationships that I've had with guys. You know, there's been times where I've kind of felt like I wasn't good enough in relationships, or just interactions that I've had with guys, because they've said that. You know, I remember one guy in particular that I talked to, it seemed like nothing I did was ever right. Like, he would make comments about the way I wore my hair and the type of clothes that I wore and how I acted. And that took an emotional toll on me. And I'm not gonna lie, like, that really did impact my self-esteem and my self-worth, because it was just like, you know, there's this guy that I really liked and he didn't feel the same way about me. And I felt like I was trying to be something that I wasn't, just to make this person like me. And then it took me, for one, going to counseling. And I tell people that all the time. I stress that, please go to counseling. There's nothing wrong with that, because it really gives you a lot of great insight about how to handle things in your life. I feel like just really engaging in counseling and just really learning about my worth and what I can bring to the table, and that I am a good person and I do deserve good things and things like that. And also just kind of increasing my knowledge spiritually, just continue to develop my relationship with God. That really helped me, because it allowed me to see that I am enough, which again goes back to what we talked about a lot in episode 2 of our podcast, when we talked about self-esteem. So, I mean, I'm glad to say that I'm not in that space that I was before.
Right.
So definitely depression, because I can really see how people could get to that stage because of constant feeling like you're not good enough and things like that. And so, and if you're not careful, for example, like if you're feeling rejected in a relationship that you're in, it can make you jaded towards other relationships that you may get in the future. You may think that just because this one guy treated me like this, or this one girl treated me like this, everybody that I interact with or come in contact with a romantic relationship is going to be like that. And so that's something you have to work through as well, because you have to realize that every experience that you have is not going to be the same.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Tiffany says, no one wants to be rejected. However, sometimes rejection is a blessing, i.e. relationships and or jobs. You may have dodged a bullet and there is something better for you. Tiffany, you're
on point with that. Shout out to Tiffany for that. Yes, thank you.
I think a lot of times like you said, depending upon the situation, when we experience rejection, and like I said, everybody handles rejection differently. Some people can, move on, to the next situation like it did not affect them. And then for the greater majority of us, it takes some time. For some people, it may be a couple of days, weeks, months. For some people, after 10, 15 years, they're still harboring feelings and things of that nature based on a previous situation that they had or they were involved in, centered around rejection. And so it just really depends on how you handle it, how you look at it. One thing that I've learned from the different situations that I've been in, and something that I'm learning to implement more, is that there's a difference between self-reflection versus self-criticism. And I feel like a lot of times when we get rejected, and like I said, it doesn't matter what the situation is, especially those of us who are, females, we have a tendency to automatically go into self-criticism mode. You know, oh, I'm an idiot. I'm not smart enough. I'm not beautiful enough. I knew better, and this, that, and the third. And that does nothing to help your situation. If anything, you're demoralizing yourself. And like you're just putting yourself more in a rut when it comes to depression, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to low self-esteem and things of that nature. And it's a really good time to take a step back and reflect. What was your involvement in the situation? Be also looking at what can be learned from this situation moving forward, so that you can either avoid a situation like this altogether, or B, if you do happen to come in contact with a situation like that again, hey, I know how to best handle myself, because I don't want to go back into feeling like I felt before. So Tiffany, that was a great point that you brought up, and thank you.
Yeah. And another thing, in addition to depression, I kind of touched on this before, but social anxiety, I think, is another negative effect of rejection, because when you think about a person that feels anxious, especially in a social setting, they feel like they're not good enough, and that they, you know, feel awkward of being around people, feel like they can't relate to individuals. And I think a lot of that may play a part in feeling rejected previously. And so going back to what I was saying about, you know, people can sometimes get jaded when they form, you know, different relationships with new people, because they're judging it based off a previous prior experience, rather than trying to treat this new experience as something new. Like, this person may not necessarily be like how this other person treated me.
I think another negative effect with rejection, I think, is something that we all can relate to. I just kind of spoke on it a minute ago, is low self-esteem. You know, so we start to look at ourselves in a much more negative sense, with regards, like I said, especially if the rejection is coming from a romantic end. You know, we start criticizing, you know, our appearance, or if I would have, you know, did, you know, more with my hair, or made myself up, or lost the weight, gained the weight, you know, cook, clean. It can be a whole bunch of things. We begin to beat up ourselves. And as a result, like I said, it just takes you further and further and further down the pipeline to experience more problems as far as depression and anxiety is concerned. And then the other area of concern with that, if you don't get the depression and your anxiety treated, if it gets to a point where you need to see a therapist, or maybe you and your treatment team need to look at maybe medication or some alternative treatments, then you stand the risk of suicide and suicide ideation, because that is very much real. And a lot of that comes from the voices in our heads, or, like I said, the things that we've been through in our lives, that negative self-talk as well, based around, like I said, having low self-esteem regarding rejection.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm glad that you brought up the point about how in extreme cases that it can lead to, you know, suicidal thoughts and things like that. Because I want to point out, for those that don't know, that this month, the month of September, is Suicide Prevention Month. And so I just kind of want to throw that out there, that if it's yourself or just anybody that you know are struggling emotionally, you know, please reach out for help. And like the suicide prevention number, I'll give that for, you know, people that want to know that off the top of their head, but it's 1-800-273-8255. And you can actually call that number at any time and speak with a counselor to get support. So definitely don't be ashamed to reach out, because I know that sometimes it can be hard emotionally, having to deal with the impacts of rejection.
Oh, yeah. And rejection, too, also has a tendency to lead to extreme loneliness. So a lot of times, like I said, when people push back against us, or we are abandoned and so on and so forth, we internalize those feelings, we internalize those emotions. And as a result, instead of seeking out help, whether help comes in the form of a professional, help comes in the form of family, help comes in the form of a pastor, or your friends at your church and things of that nature. Some of us have a tendency to retreat into ourselves, thinking that, we can deal with our pain. We can deal with this sadness on our own. And once again, some people can and some people can't. So you definitely have to be self-aware of how you deal best with situations as they come.
Very true. Very true. So, do you have anything, Keisha, that I guess in terms of rejection that kind of stands out for you when maybe you've kind of felt like that? You felt rejected, just anything?
I think what stands out, since you've already talked about from the relationship standpoint.
Well, you can share that too, if you have an example of that.
I'll speak from the professional standpoint. I remember when the recession happened, latter end 2006, 2007. I was working for a company, had been in that company for about 5 years, enjoyed what I was doing, enjoyed the clientele, working with my coworkers and things of that nature. But unfortunately, nothing against what I had done. They downsized staff. And since I was one of the, what they say, last hired.
Last hired.
First hired. I ended up being laid off from my job. And so, to say the least, I took it hard. Because for those of us, especially those of us who work with kids, and at the time I was working with adjudicated youth. And so if you don't know what adjudicated youth are, those are youth. Basically, they've been sentenced by a judge, but instead of sending them to a prison or to jail, they will send them to a program. Some are short-term, some are long-term. The program that I worked at, it was long-term in nature. And so during that time, those children will get various tasks that they have to complete before their time is up. And then they go back in front of a judge. And at that point, a judge can decide, hey, to go and send them to jail or prison, or if they feel like they've satisfied their requirements, they will go ahead and discharge them for the program. And so, to say the least, I loved what it is that I did. So when I was let go, to say the least, I was very sad, very upset. And I'm one of those people, like I said, I tend to draw into myself when I am faced with rejection. But I do thank God for my former coworkers and colleagues. A lot of them got on the ground, was helping me trying to locate jobs and things of that nature. And so that's how I actually wind up at Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare, because one of my sorority sisters actually knew somebody at the time who worked in human resources. So they helped to get me situated there. But even when I got to TMH, like I still didn't feel, I don't know, I still wasn't content about where I was professionally. And so at that point, I made a decision to go back to school to further my education, get some more education. And then got the degree. And a lot of us are told, or a lot of us feel, once we get a degree, boom, that job is just gonna,
don't work like that.
And that's what I believe for the most part. And find out very quick, fast, and hurry, not gonna be your story, Missy. And so I applied, and I kept getting rejected from jobs, and it was just getting to the point, like I said, it was really starting to wear and tear on my self-esteem. And I know I applied for a job at Baylor University out in Texas. I'll never forget, I got a phone call from the human resources coordinator over there. And I applied at the time for an academic coordinator position. And she got on the phone and she told me, she was like, I'm very impressed by your resume and your experience. However, what we're looking for somebody that has more academic advising versus you have more of the mental health advising on your side. But she told me not to give up. And she told me that a door would eventually come open. And so although I was still upset after that phone call, I wasn't as let down as I was before. That kind of gave me the zhush to keep pushing forward. And like I said, eventually I wound up at Florida State. A door was open, and that's where I am presently. But like I said, from the professional point of view, that's my experience as far as rejection is concerned. So.
And, as I was listening to your story, it just made me think about that saying, rejection is God's form of protection. Yeah. So I feel like with that experience about, your job situation, that just wasn't the job for you. Exactly. And I know I've experienced situations like that in terms of there was jobs that I really wanted and it wasn't for me. And, I'm not gonna lie, there were times when I would just really beat myself up and really self-loathe and be like, oh my God, am I good enough or whatever have you? But then, just really like talking to friends and really just thinking about it, I had to realize, that wasn't for me.
Exactly.
And I don't believe that. Just speaking from a spiritual standpoint, I don't believe that God would put us in situations where we would fail. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, he's gonna, if it's really for him, he's gonna make it where we'll know that it's from him. Like, it'll be just smooth. Not saying that there won't be some challenges along the way, but he'll help you to be able to adapt to those challenges and to be able to deal with them. So, so that's why that saying about rejection is God's form of protection always sticks.
Too, sometimes I think, Shnequia, we're playing it safe.
Yeah.
And I can say that for me, even from a romantic standpoint of view, sometimes you ain't got no business entertaining this person, or you ain't got no business filling out this job application. But because hey, I got the minimum, qualifications for it, I know that I got this, and if I was offered the job, I would do fine with it. Or from a relational context, this person may not necessarily check off all my boxes, or, they going through a rough patch, right now, I'm gonna stick by them and things of your nature, but something in your spirit telling you like something ain't right.
Something in the milk ain't clean.
Exactly. That too can put you in a situation down the road to be rejected. Or on the opposite hand, you are the one that's going to end up rejecting somebody.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So it's kind of like, in some ways, rejection can be good for us because it can help us to really grow in areas, and like you said, not necessarily play it safe or just be comfortable with like things that we know about. Because I'm learning more and more every day that it's important not to feel comfortable. Like, you need to be uncomfortable sometimes. And I'm not saying that rejection is supposed to feel good. I mean, because it doesn't. But at the same time, I think it can help propel us to get to the next level that we're supposed to be.
Exactly. And too, a lot of times we're thinking small-minded.
Right.
When our God, he's on another stratosphere.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're sitting up here thinking or knowing, what's best for you. And he's like, you don't even have a clue. You don't even have an idea. Yeah. And then, like I said, once you overcome that situation and you're in a much better space, you tend to understand and appreciate why it is that you went through what it is that you went through.
Because there was a lesson in it.
It was a lesson in it.
It may not necessarily be revealed right then, but it will be revealed.
Oh, yeah.
Somewhere down the line.
Oh, yes. And I think too, like, with rejection, it builds resiliency.
Yeah.
It builds resiliency. So for those of us, like I said, we've been pushed aside, we've been left behind, we've been abandoned. And something that I tell my students, there's nothing wrong with feeling what you're feeling because you're human. So allow yourself to feel whatever emotions you are feeling. You want to cry? Cry. You're angry? Be angry. You're frustrated? Be frustrated. Because I think a lot of times we have a tendency to just tell people, oh, just get over it. I don't understand why you upset about that anyway, or you know better than to get yourself in that situation. And even if they did, like I said, at the end of the day, we human. So feel free to sit in what you are feeling and process whatever it is that you need to process. The kicker is you can't stay there.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot stay there, because the longer that you stay there, you just going to continue to wallow in sorrow. And like I said, sorrow leads to defeat leads to depression, and so on and so forth. So take the time that you need to deal with what it is that you've got to deal with. But no, you cannot remain there. At some point, you've got to pick yourself up and move forward with your life. Because what you're going through also is not about you. There's somebody else on the other side that needs to witness and bear witness to your testimony. So the longer that you're sitting up here in a rut, you're holding somebody else up from their breakthrough.
Yeah. We got a comment in the comment section from Lisa. Hey, Lisa. It's one of my friends. Sometimes it's just about perspective. Rejection is inevitable. Mm-hmm. We just need to shift perspective to see what we can learn from it. Take a step back and reflect.
Most definitely.
So true. So true. That's why I was saying earlier when we first got started, people say, oh, no, I've never felt rejection or whatever. I'm like, yes, you have. You may not have just experienced it to the depths and to the level of certain people, but you've experienced some level of rejection.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, even if we would sit down and ask like children, like I think about like when you were in elementary school and they would choose teams. So for like volleyball or kickball, think about that child that's always the last child to sit up here and be, picked, and they really want to be on the other person's team. But then you hear, you hear the other kids over here whispering like, we don't really want him. That's a form of rejection.
Yeah.
That's a form of rejection. Or think about that child, like I said, the parent been telling them for the longest, oh, I'm going to show up for you. I'm going to be there to support you at that play. I'm going to be there to support you at that game. And time in and time out, they wait and they wait and they wait. And the parent never shows rejection.
Very true. Very true. It's like Lisa said, rejection is just inevitable. It's just a part of life. It's just a part of the process. It's going to happen. But like you said, Keisha, I think it just depends on how we let it affect us. And like you were saying about, allowing yourself permission, because that's really what it is giving yourself permission to feel the way that you're feeling. And then it's kind of like, once I've allowed myself to really feel this, then what am I going to do with it?
Exactly.
Am I going to really just let it affect me and just completely take over my life? Or am I going to learn from this and then use this to my advantage to move forward?
Exactly.
And to help me to grow.
Exactly.
Personally, I prefer the latter. But but there was a point when I would just be in the first one. So,
and I think all of us at some point we've been there, and for whatever reason, maturity, life experiences, sometimes it takes somebody coming into your life or a parent, sitting down and talking some sense into you and things of that nature. I know that's what helped me with my last situation. It was my mama, just being real firm, with me, showing that tough love in a sense. So yeah.
Yeah. Tough love.
Self-love.
Sometimes that's needed.
Yeah.
But I think it also depends on how it's presented.
Most definitely.
To us, because you don't want that to be a form of rejection either.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just depends on how it comes to us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then two, when you are rejected or you're feeling that way, make sure that you have a good support system around you. I can't reiterate that enough. That's something that I'm very, very big on. In your support system, you may have several different support systems for different, situations and or scenarios. You may just have one core support system of who you count on. But having people who are going to speak life into you and not death, who are going to sit up here and tell you all the things that are beautiful about you, what you bring to the table and things of that nature, but also holding you accountable for what it is that you say that you're going to do, moving forward, as well, is another coping strategy and or mechanism that can help you to be successful coming out of this situation.
Yeah, that's true. And I think also, just because I'm all about, helping people to identify their strengths and learning about that. And I think another way of helping to cope with rejection is knowing what you're good at and knowing that you are important. Like, just because this may not have worked in my favor doesn't mean that every other situation that I come in contact with will not. So, I mean, just really know, like, I have a purpose. Like, I'm here for a reason. I have gifts that I can really share with people, God-given gifts. So just really paying attention to that. And I know sometimes it may be difficult for people to say that, I don't necessarily have any strengths, but you do. You do. Sometimes it may take people to point out things that we're naturally good at or we do well to help us to be able to identify strengths. But I guarantee that there is something that you're able to give or that you're good at that can be identified as a strength.
Oh yeah. And a good thing or something that you can do when you are faced with rejection, let's say in the form of a job or even from a relationship context, because I've done this before. Once you've gotten over what it is that you need to get over, I would say if you can handle it, go to the person or go to your support group and really be transparent and really be honest with them. Can you tell me what it is that I'm strong at? Tell me what it is that I'm good at. But then also on the flip side, also tell me what are some areas that I need to work on as well, because that may have been the reason why you didn't get the job to begin with. Yeah, you may appear very well on paper, but during the interview, you were kind of all over the place.
So feedback, basically.
Exactly. Getting feedback, getting constructive feedback from individuals. Or if you and your ex have that type of, communication that, although we're not together, but we can still be cordial with one another, after the relationship has had, the emotions have had time to die down, and you all can talk about, hey, like what it is that went wrong. And being able and being willing to really listen to what it is that they're telling you and not taking offense to it, not going on the defense about it, but taking that information and utilizing it to move forward and to be a better version, of yourself. So professional wise, that may mean, hey, you may need to go back to school.
Or take some trainings.
Take some different trainings or get a certification in order to get the job that you see yourself getting. And from a relational context, that may need, hey, I need to work on my communication, skills, and things of that nature. I need to work on how I better manage my anger, or, I'm a little clingy, I'm a little naggy when it comes to this, that, and the third. So once again, although it does not feel good, there's always something good that can come out of it if you let it.
This goes back to what I was saying before about you choose what you do with it.
Exactly.
How you let it affect you. Okay. So we're kind of running towards the end of our time, and we've talked a lot about how rejection affects us and like things that we can do. Is there anything, Keisha, that you feel like you want to add that we haven't already talked about or covered?
I think that we've hit on it for the most part, like we stated before. At some point, if you have yet, I remember, that's what came to my mind. I remember the old people. There's a gospel song for those of you all that's Baptist. Y'all may recognize it. But I used to hear when we were children. We used to hear all the time, if it ain't been no rain in your life,
wait a while.
And as a child, I never understood, listening to the choir singing that, like, as a child, are they actually talking about, like, what are they talking about? You see rain at least once or twice a week or something like that. But as you get older, you understand they're not talking about the rain that falls from the sky. They're talking about the different trials and tribulations and hurdles and stumbles that you're going to come upon at some point during your journey, and how you're going to best deal with it and things of that nature. So if it ain't been no rain in your life, wait a while, because it's going to come. But as we've stated, even with it coming, you can still get through it. It may be uncomfortable. I ain't gonna say no may. It is going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have sometimes you want to throw in the towel. It's going to become a challenge. You may become defensive. You may pull back from people and things of that nature. But it's all up to you how you want to move forward with the situation. Like I said, you can continue to wallow in that negative thought, that negative self-talk, or at some point, like I said, you can learn whatever it is that you need to learn and move forward, not only helping yourself, but at some point being able to help and be a blessing to somebody else who may come into a similar situation.
Yeah. We have a question in the comments. I wanted to put this one on the screen. It's from Lisa. She says, question, what would be a good way to reject someone to minimize hurt? Oh, it's a good question. You got something you want to say about that?
So I had a situation, I would say a couple of months ago. I was dating somebody, or seeing somebody, and although this person overall was a good person, relationship, well, they just was not ready for a relationship. And one thing that I'm about, I don't do the whole new school texting type of thing. I'm old school, so I want to
get to know me, call me.
Huh?
You say get to know me, call me.
Exactly. Calling face to face. And so I felt for what I needed to tell him because I wasn't happy. And although people have texted me like about things and ended things, that's not the type of person that I am. That's not how adults operate. And so I called this individual and told them that I needed to meet up with them, and that we needed to talk. And so I tell my students, I use the hamburger method. That's something that I was taught in school, and I still utilize it today in the professional realm. I started off with telling them something, good about them. And then from there, went and segued into the situation at hand. And then from there, ended it with something, positive, like we can continue to still be friends. And I don't want you to think that I'm saying that, once again, that you're a bad person, because you're not. We're just not a good fit for one another.
No, go ahead. Were you finished?
That was it. But that's just one method that I use, to use the hamburger methods. Good criticism followed by the situation at hand, and ended it, like I said, with something good at the end.
I think I would answer that question in the same way too, because I know that we've all experienced times where, you know, there may have been someone who liked us and we may not necessarily have felt the same way. But I always look at it as though, you know, even though I'm flattered, you know, that you feel this way, but but I mean, you know, sometimes it may not necessarily be a good fit or whatever. And I think it's just really important to just be honest and let the person know that, not just saying, oh no, you trash, you this, you that, you know, just really just really just being mean and malicious to the person, but just really just kind of letting them know in an assertive, honest way about, you know, how you feel, and just thinking that, you know, I think you're a great person, but this may not be something that I think that would be good for me at this time. So I hope that answers your question, Lisa. Thank you for asking that too, by the way. All right. Does anybody else have any questions or comments that y'all want to put in the chat, in the comments? Johnny's like, amen. Shout out to Johnny. Yeah. Oh, Lisa said yes, so I guess we did answer her question.
Good.
So, that's good. That's good. Any other comments? Like I said, questions, final thoughts?
What about you, cuz? Any final thoughts on rejection?
No, I think we pretty much have already said everything that I wanted to kind of touch on. I think just most importantly for me, just not really wallowing in it and staying in that space, just really using it as a tool to really just better yourself.
Yeah.
And help yourself. So that's what it'd be for me. So, and I always just, you know, as always, like I always say, helping people, you know, really being supportive and loving one another. Cause, you know, like I've always said, we're in difficult times right now. And so it's just important to just really be, you know, a supportive person for someone, and just being a listening ear to someone that may not necessarily have that.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie. Just want to say, ladies, you are awesome every week. Love your show. Thank you. Thank you. And also, Maggie has a podcast too. She's a part of a podcast called Lush Exchange. So I want to plug that too, because she's always a faithful support of us. So y'all make sure y'all support her and what she's got going on too, because she has a lot of good topics on her podcast as well. All right. Anything you have, Keisha?
That is it, cuz.
All right. Well, that's all that I have. Thank y'all so much for tuning in on this episode and really being a part of the discussion, because we always appreciate that. Yes. And like I said in the beginning, just definitely make sure if you like the content, continue to really just like, share, comment, subscribe, follow. Just do all of that and really just help us to get the word, because we want the word out, because we want to continue to put out good quality content that you all really like and that is beneficial and that's helpful to everyone. So we will be back in 2 weeks for another great episode. So we hope to see you here. Tune in at 8 p.m. same time. Facebook Live, YouTube. So until then, y'all take care, be safe, and love one another. And if you're not having a good day or a good evening, change it. All right. Have a good night, y'all.
Y'all take care.
All right, then. Bye.